Hi, everyone. Wilkinson here. I am back. I've missed a couple episodes. My apologies for that. The reason being that I took the position of stage manager for the new gay theater, The Bent, in Palm Springs. And my guest today is, well, actually, I knew him before because it's Kai Brothers, and I photographed him a while back. And we met there, and then he was one of the actors that rescued us at the last minute. We had someone that needed to be replaced, and he stepped in a week before the show opened and did an absolutely amazing job. But anyway, Kai, say hi to my people.
Hello, everyone.
I'm glad you came in. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me.
We may go 2 episodes with you. I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Sure.
So anyway, tell us a little of your story. Where'd you grow up? You're gay. We're all gay. Half the guys in Palm Springs are. What's your story?
Well, I was born in Santa Cruz in the early 60s. I have a twin sister. Pretty much had a normal childhood, but then, the whole parents getting divorced and moving around a little bit kind of happened.
How old were you when they got divorced?
About 9.
Okay.
And then puberty hit hard, and that's kind of when I realized I was different. I thought I was unique, kind of one in the world kind of a thing. I didn't understand.
The only gay in town.
Right. But back then, that's how it felt. There was no TV or movies or anything that I knew about which talked about what gay was. So
stop for a minute. So did you live with your mother, your father, or both, or what happened there?
It was my mom and my sister.
Okay. And did she remarry or did she stay single?
She repartnered.
Did
yes.
she? Okay.
Yeah.
So you had another dad figure there.
Yes. And he's still around too.
Okay. Resume.
So, yeah, I think it was just, feeling kind of alone in the world, not kind of knowing that I shouldn't talk about it, just had to be a secret.
How did you know that? What put that seed in there? Do you know?
I think just an instinct. And I'm a very instinctual person. I'm very good about my surroundings and the environment and the mood and all of those kind of things. And it just, to me, felt like, don't tell anybody this. It's your secret.
So it was bad. You knew it was bad in some way, or you thought it might be.
I don't know if I really felt bad. I never felt guilty for
different.
Yeah. It just felt like I was, I don't know. Yeah. Something taboo maybe, but not.
Well, to me, that would be the same as bad, but
Well,
whatever.
Maybe that's not a good word.
Words have different meanings for different people, but whatever. Anyway, you felt that way.
But then, as you kind of get into your later teens, you start, hearing about homosexuality and seeing people that, look like they are or tell you they are. And then having actually some really important people in my life kind of come out, not really that openly, but teachers that I had in high school, some students in high school. And then I just started working in town, doing various jobs, either at fast food or a restaurant or that kind of jobs. And those people, those places have gay people a lot. And before I knew it, I had some gay friends and was hanging out with them and sneaking into bars and meeting other guys. And then I think this is where it got unique for myself, because I hadn't really done anything with a guy. I'd maybe, kissed girls in high school just to kind of try and fit in. But I got invited to go to a gay pride parade, and it was 1980, and I was still a teenager. I hadn't been with a guy. I was just kind of still exploring, and all of a sudden, it was just like my head exploded just seeing. I'm going to get emotional because it was just so impactful. And when P-flag, everyone talks about P-flag, but to be that age and to see P-flag, parents and friends of gays and lesbians, it's like just something inside of me just felt awakened, but accepted and validated at the same time. And that changed everything for me.
I have a similar story. So I came out, I was with my first partner. We were in San Diego. I had never actually been to a gay parade. Mm-hmm. And so I went to the San Diego one, which is pretty awesome. And I'm sitting there. Now here, you got to picture the crowd and all. I mean, come on, gay guys. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on. I mean, half-dressed guys in all weird costumes and blah, blah, blah. I mean, just kind of a lot of craziness. But the Metropolitan chapel. I forget the full name of it. Anyway, they had a float coming down. Now, I have a religious background. I was in the ministry and stuff, but I, of course, left all that. So the float comes down, and they were singing the song, which I knew from my church days, and it was Our God is an Awesome God. And in the middle of the craziness, I burst out crying in the parade because I had the same kind of a response. Like,
wow.
Here I am in the middle of all this, and it's pretty
right.
wild.
And that they were singing that song. That's amazing.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. I saw Leathermen and drag queens and
cowboys probably and military and everything in between.
Everything. Yeah. Everything in between. And it wasn't long after that. In fact, it was less than a month that I was like, started
you wanted to try it out, huh?
Yes. And of course, I lost my virginity to a guy who I wouldn't tell him the truth, even though he asked me. And then he was so mad at me afterwards because he pretty much went to town, if you know what I mean.
Oh,
and
so you didn't tell him that you were inexperienced? Is that what it was?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But my friend and I went to a bar. I want to pick somebody up. It was July 4th. We went and watched the fireworks. Then we went to the bar.
Did you look older than you were?
No.
Did they just let you in?
Yeah. They were pretty good about that. The only time they asked us to leave was when they had to call the police because there was a fight. So they
didn't want you around then.
Yeah. They knew what was going on.
Wow.
Yep. And I picked up a guy. It was a one-night stand. What a way to dive into it.
And that was your first time?
Yeah.
Huh. How'd that go?
It was, like I said, it was a little rough just because I wouldn't tell him that I was a virgin, and I don't know why. I don't know why we do that. We're embarrassed or.
Well, I mean, it's all a new thing, so.
Yeah. And he said he would have been different if he knew, and I kind of wish I had told him because it wouldn't have been quite as like, wow, that's what sex is. Ow.
Oh, so he would have been gentler with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But did that whet your appetite for something?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'd go to bars looking for guys sometimes, or, back then that's all we had. We didn't have internet and all of that. And sometimes I would be doing a play or a musical and I'd meet someone in the cast. But I wasn't going crazy. I just, would meet some guys and hang out and something might happen. And it was all very kind of casual back then. And then kind of within a few months after that, I met a guy that I started dating, and his name was Chuck, and he lived in San Francisco.
And you were still in Santa Cruz at this point?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He used to come down. He was a minister, and he had some of his parishioners, what do you call them? Yeah. I didn't grow up like you under any religious dogma. I grew up in Santa Cruz in the 60s, so it was... Yeah, he used to come down because he had some of his parishioners that lived in Santa Cruz, and he would stay and he would go out to the bars, and that's where I met him. And I thought he was an oddball. And
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he just looked different. The city, maybe that city look to him, a little bit more. Yeah. But he was Italian and sexy, but I just I was playing hard to get with him. I don't know why. That was my shtick back then. And then the next day, I ran into my friend, and he had like hickeys all over his neck, and he was talking about this really hot guy that he had gone home with that night, only to find out that it was Chuck.
Oh.
And when he was telling me all about,
the episode,
being endowed, I guess, and how hot he was, I was like, oh, damn, I missed out on that one. But in actuality, he had kind of used him to get to me, and I'm sure he did that on purpose, because the next night he was at the bar again, and, well... That's was the start of a long relationship.
Oh, really? How long were you involved with him?
Well, I mean, for being 18, it was a long time. It was about a year and a half.
And where were you living during all this time?
I was living at home.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did your mother and her partner know you were gay?
During that time, yes. Because the more I accepted it with myself, and the more I found a community and friends. Yeah. And I did. I had a lot of good friends from the church that were my age or a little bit older and gay, and living the city life. And I was really in awe of that. And just...
When do you say the church? We talked a little beforehand, but for my listeners, so this guy who was the pastor, you became involved in that church then?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And it was a very progressive, open diverse kind of church,
Okay.
which I really liked what their message was and what they provided and the support and teachings. And it was something I kind of needed in my life at that time. So it was nice to have that. So, but yeah, once I came out to my parents, it was a whole different ball game, because it's one of those things where if they think they know, but when they know, the dynamic just changes.
Right.
It's no longer, oh, I wonder if my son is gay, or I think,
Oh my God, my son is.
yeah, oh my God,
Dang.
he's gay. And it got to be this really weird round robin scenario where I would talk to them one at a time just to kind of check in with them and see how they were doing. And my mom would be like, oh, I'm fine, but Michael is just so conservative in that regard that he's having a hard time with it. And I would talk to Michael, and he would say, oh, I'm fine with it, but I have gay friends, blah blah blah. Again, I'm like, what? This totally hot stud, a friend of his was gay.
Oh wow.
But your mom, it's just hard having a son that's gay, and she cries herself to sleep at night. I'm like, wait a minute.
They're blaming each other.
Yeah, for whatever reason,
Wonder why.
They were trying to be okay with it, I guess. And then my sister was like, oh, I'm okay with it, but just don't tell anybody, or I'm not going to tell anybody either. And so I ended up getting them all down to the dining table and having a little talk about it all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but that kind of backfired, because they started picking on me, and that, I was always in San Francisco and I wasn't home anymore, and I wasn't doing my chores, and I was too busy off, living this new life and stuff. And it ended up imploding to the point where I was asked to leave.
And that was the Black Friday weekend you told me about.
Yes. I worked for then Santa Cruz County Bank, which is no longer around. And I went in on a Thursday, and they dismissed me, said I was being fired.
And they had a reason.
You know what? It's interesting. Like, I had my leg tucked under my butt when I was on the phone sometimes, or something like that, which was like really bizarre stuff. But my motto is like, if you don't want me here, I don't want to be here either.
Right. Exactly.
And I'm not going to try to sue for wrongful termination or anything like that. I was just, ready to move on. And then, of course, the next day I get asked to leave home, kicked out of the house. And that weekend I went away with Chuck, and he broke up with me. And, we kind of had an on and off again. That's why it was a year and a half. But I was at the point, because this was a year later, where I was pretty devastated by that. And I just...
Well, especially after the 2 preceding days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all together, yes. So that Sunday we go to church, and I ended up telling the boys, these 3 guys that lived together, there was John, David, and Stephen. And they were just sweet, sweet guys. And when they heard about my situation, they just said, well, come move in with us. And I'm like...
And that was up in San Francisco?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they invited me up to live there, and just totally took me under their wings. I'm sure people do that all the time, but to me, it just seems so, wow, this is
generous. Yeah.
Yeah. Who does that? Who just says, well, come live with us, get on your feet, see what you can do, and
Right.
So I literally went home, wrote a note, talked to my dad, see if he would go pick up some boxes at the house. And I got on a Greyhound bus, and I went up to San Francisco, and he brought my things up. My sister came in first, I think, and saw the note and just broke down.
Wow.
Sorry. But she was devastated, and I think Michael and my mom were as well. They said I had 30 days, and I was gone in, less than 5.
But they gave you an ultimatum of 30 days, though, right?
Yeah. But like I said, if I don't feel like I'm wanted, then I just leave.
Right.
And I left, and interestingly enough, and this kind of segues into something else I want to talk about, but within a month, I got really, really sick. I had fever and fatigue, and I couldn't do anything. And my roommate, who had been a nurse, was really freaked out and put me in a mummy sleeping bag to try to sweat it out of me. And
right, break the fever. Right.
Yeah, and I didn't go to a doctor, but in retrospect, that was when I seroconverted to HIV positive, and that was June of 1981. And I thought at the time, not knowing about HIV, that maybe your body just collapses when you've had these traumas, like
Right.
being asked to leave your house, fired from your job, broken up with your boyfriend.
Well, it does have an effect on your body. I mean, all that emotional stress, of course it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I chalked it up to at that time. It wasn't until, years later that I was like, ooh, okay, nope, it was something else.
Did you recover the initial blow or of what you were feeling physically?
Yeah. Within a week, I was, totally back to normal and forgot all about it.
Wow.
So after that, I'd lived my life. I got some temp jobs. I got some permanent jobs. I was going to SF State and studying theater and just really living the life. And I'm glad I had that time because it wasn't that much longer that, we knew about HIV and probably sexually transmitted and all of those things. And being in San Francisco at that time, you're just so seeing every moment and every different shift of thought of maybe it's poppers or maybe it's sex or maybe, who knows what it is, and having it all unfold right there, right in front of your eyes. You're in it. You're in the stew. You're just like,
right.
It was a very eye-opening and life-changing experience to see this and to know people who were getting sick and to know people who were dying, and kind of steered clear from my personal group of friends for probably until like the early 90s, I'd like to say.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that was interesting, but maybe because we were younger and we hadn't really been sexually active as long when it first hit. But I started noticing this kind of interesting timeline of events where my ex, Chuck, got sick. And then the boyfriend that he had before me, who was my roommate, Steven, for a while, got sick. And then the boyfriend after was Jeffrey, and he got sick. And then, they kind of died in that order as well. Chuck died, then Steven died, then Jeffrey died.
Wow. What kind of time frame from getting sick to their passing?
It could be like a year.
Okay.
Yeah, probably. But some people hit it as much as they could. It still had a stigma,
Right.
back then. And it's unfortunate because they did last so long that they made it within a couple years of the different cocktails and different...
Yeah. They just missed
options.
the rescue boat.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
But personally, I'm thinking, what's going on with me? Why I'm not even sick? And that doesn't make sense in the whole scheme of things. What's going on here?
So you figured I must have it, but...
I knew I had HIV. By 89, I finally went to the public health services and did an anonymous testing and found out I was positive. And I want to say I felt like the wind, or got punched in the gut, or the wind was out of my sails or whatever. But, it was more just yeah.
Because you had been thinking that the probability was there.
Yeah. It's still just like my parents hearing that I'm gay, to have it said to you is still a little bit jarring and all, and emotional, but I moved on pretty quickly. I knew I had it pretty much.
So next thing, what happened then?
So
Well, you weren't getting sick.
no,
You
so
just knew you had it, but strange, I'm not getting sick.
right.
Oh.
And
How did that unfold?
I kind of thought for whatever reason that I was going to die at 36 because I don't know, I had this kind of weird premonition as a child that was what I was going to die at for whatever reason, but it was such a jarring realization.
So as a child, the number 36 popped in your mind?
Yeah, when I was in my early teens.
Okay.
And then as I'm getting to 34, 35, I'm thinking, well, maybe that's going to happen.
This is how it'll happen.
Yeah, it was an actual premonition. And I'm at the same time, I'm working with some doctors and they're trying to, get me to take AZT, which was the only thing at the time. And I, resisted doing that, thankfully. And then I had to switch to another doctor because of some insurance issues. And he was trying to get me to take medication. And by that time, there were cocktail type of solutions out there. And I still resisted. And then after all of my friends that I've mentioned, the roommates and the people at church had died, I thought there's something different with me. And I don't know how I knew that. I mean, it's somewhat obvious.
Well, you're alive.
I was alive and I wasn't sick.
Yeah.
And my doctor kept saying, you're healthy. Your T cells are over 1,000. And that just kept happening year after year. So I finally started asking around, like, are there studies that study people that are, surviving? And I couldn't find anything, even to my doctors who specialize in HIV, until a friend of mine pointed me towards Dr. Levy at SFSU, San Francisco State University, and he was an early pioneer with HIV and discovered it, the virus, early on. He was one of the first founders of it, and he was doing a study specifically on non-progressors. And I signed up and started doing like monthly blood draws with him. I can't even tell you how many times my blood has been drawn in the last 20, 30 years.
Gallons, huh?
Probably. But it finally felt good because I felt like I was, you have to imagine what I'm feeling inside of being in this boat. I mean, there could be so many things like survivor's guilt or,
right,
depression for losing friends, or I don't know. But for me, it was more, I was just so thankful to be alive and living a life still and living for my friends. That's kind of how I felt. And I just wanted to give something back however I could. And so I started signing up for other studies that I would find out about and being recruited by the NIH to fly out and do studies with them. And it just grew and grew. And I tried to do everything that I could. I did, holy cow, I ended up doing a colon biopsy procedure, which was freaky. I could literally watch them as they have this claw-like thing that grabbed onto the tissue and just like pulled until it would get a sample off of the colon.
Oh, right.
And you see blood splurt out. I was like, after a while, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to watch this. And they did 25 of those.
Wow.
I won't forget that. I did a spinal tap. They wanted to try to assess something within, where HIV can be found or something, or comparing it to other places where they were doing samples of the virus, the viral load. And I had a really, really bad reaction to that, where I now know what a migraine is, because I had to lay down and put a towel over my eyes and have no noise for like the rest of the day because I was in such humongous pain. Won't do that again. And it's mostly blood draws. So they really want to look at the blood, and they do literally have done experiments where they put my blood in a petri dish and throw different viruses at it, and the blood just kills whatever's in my blood, kills the virus just almost instantly.
Wow.
So what I've learned is that the virus can attach to your, infiltrate your T cells. And when it does that, it uses that T cell to grow more of the virus. And then it explodes to the point where they'd start going into your body and taking over other T cells. So that's how it replicates, and that's how it grows. And my immune system, I've been told, when my body knows that there is a T cell that has been infected, it will just self-destruct it. It'll kill it off so that it can't replicate and grow, or grow and replicate. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, it's been a interesting life since then, because I literally, at one point had quit my job, cashed out my 401k, went and traveled. And just like a lot of people who started medications and such, you're like, oh, okay, well, now what? That was
right. How long were you over in Europe?
About 6 weeks, I want to say. Okay. Yeah.
But you spent a lot of money.
I did it on the cheaps,
Did you?
Yeah. I met some guys that took me in London, and I got to go to like an event where Lady Di was there. I was like within like 20 feet of her, and going to see shows. And they took me to the clubs where little drag shows would happen. And like I had the whole Londoner local experience of London. And so I have no regrets about what I did. And I came back, I got a better job than the one I had, which I really didn't like.
So one door closed, another open.
Yeah.
It's funny because when I first moved to Palm Springs, I had a roommate. Bad idea. I'll never do that again. But anyway, he was telling me his story, and he was one of the early guys at Microsoft, and actually drove Bill Gates around in his car. They had lunch and stuff, like all that kind of stuff. That's so early.
Oh, wow.
And he was HIV positive.
Oh, wow.
And all of his friends died. Yeah. So at one point he pulled out of Microsoft, took his literally millions of dollars.
Wow.
And went and traveled around the world for 5 years, spent all of his money, came home, and because he knew he was going to die, came home and didn't die. Wow. He was penniless at that point. So that was kind of an interesting story.
But you don't think he regrets that either, do you? Or
I never ask him that question. That's a good question.
Yeah. and I fall forward. I just keep going, and I'm very driven. And, to think of where I've become or where I've arrived at in my life at this point is just incredible.
Right.
I'm a very hardworking, very determined person. And maybe I trust that, enough to know that I can quit this job if I don't like it. And it's, something's going to happen. But, then of course I, got a boyfriend, we got married, I bought a house. I worked at Wells Fargo for 25 years. There was a shift, in my life at that point when I knew that I was going to survive this.
So I want to stop you here because when we were talking before, and you mentioned something that I thought was curious. So before you got into the studies and knew what was going on with you, you had all these doctors wanting you to do all these different, somewhat experimental treatments at that point, right?
It wasn't treatments.
Well, they wanted you to take the meds and all this stuff, right? As they develop new ones and that.
Right.
But your intuition told you no, and you told me so. You're doing a number of other things. What were they?
Right. So the first doctor I had, this is early on when it was just AZT, and he was trying to push me on it because when I came back from that trip to Europe, my immune system was a little, down. And I think that just happens from travel, from what I know now. But at the time, he was concerned. And the thought was, if it starts to go down, it's just going to be a quick downhill to death kind of a situation. You need to attack it aggressively. And I, for whatever reason, was like, no, I'm not going to take AZT. And he wrote me out a prescription literally and handed it to me and said, by the time you come back for your next, lab work results, you need to start taking AZT. And I said no to his face. I said, I'm going to do acupuncture, and I'm going to do, I had joined a IEP at the time in San Francisco, might still be there, a facility that provided alternate, medicinal approaches than Western medicine. And I wanted to use their services and meditate. I ended up doing these, what do you call it when you're trying to manifest something?
Well, it's visualizations, basically.
Yeah, visualizations. Exactly.
Manifest then in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I was visualizing was something in my body, like kind of like almost like a video game, where it's like you're aiming something at a star or a ship or whatever, and you're like,
when you're shooting it,
you're blasting it. Yeah.
Okay.
And I was just imagining that something in my body was literally like going around and killing this virus. So when the doctor years later ended up explaining to me and drawing me this whole diagram, I was like, holy cow. He drew out what my visualization was in my head.
Wow.
And I used to...
Your body was just blasting it like that.
Yeah, and I don't know if I was in tune with my body and just seeing what was going on, or whether I was telling my body that's what it had to do, and it did. Like, that's one of those, who knows, chicken and egg things. Like, I don't know, but that's what ended up being the reality. But I'm digressing here. Anyway, back to the doctors, and they're writing out these prescriptions. I'm like telling him I'm going to do visualizations and acupuncture and all of this stuff, and I'm not going to do the AZT. And he's like, fighting me tooth and nail. But I leave, whatever it is, every 3 months, every 6 months, whatever I was doing, I went back, and he's going through my chart. And the first thing he says is like, oh, looks like you're taking the AZT. Why would you say that? He's like, well, your numbers are all back to, perfect again. And I said, well, I'm not. I told you I wasn't going to, and I didn't. And he just looked at me like, how doctors were, especially back then, it's like they're God.
Right.
And you do what they say. And I, what? It makes me sad because I thought about all the other people that did that. They just take their doctor's orders, and they, without questioning, and they could have been in my boat. They could have been long-term survivors, and maybe the AZT screwed them up. Maybe they died. Maybe they survived. I don't even want to go down that path sometimes because it's kind of a mind-boggling.
Yeah, well, what I found is the doctors are it's like they're on a railroad track, and there's no getting off of it. This is what they do. This is what you do. There's no other, side tracks. Because the second day when I arrived at Palm Springs, the day number 2 here was 127 degrees the first day.
Oh my!
Second day, my doctor from Seattle called and said, "Sorry to tell you this, but you have cancer." So I found that out, and it's like, "Oh, welcome to Palm Springs. Isn't this fun?" But I have prostate cancer, but the urologist told the head guy, the oncologist, and that I was going to have radioactive seeds put in me without even consulting me, because that's the track he was on.
Right.
So I went up to Seattle. It took a while to get an appointment, went up, And I went in there, and in the meantime, I went and saw a naturopath and set up what I was going to do, what I want to do for me. He's sitting there, he's doing his spiel, how he's going to do the seeds and that. And I'm too type A for this. So I let him talk 5 minutes. I go, stop. I go, I'm not going to do any of that stuff.
Wow.
I'm doing this. And I showed him what I was doing. We talked to all. He was a nice guy, but again, he was on his track, and that's it. So what I did before I left, I had a 45-minute appointment, like 15 minutes into it, I'm done. And so before I left, I said to him, let's switch seats. You're in my seat. What would you do? You know what he said? He said, I do what you're doing.
Wow.
And yet he was going to put the radioactive seeds in me. So,
wow.
Listen to your gut, your own intuition. And I'm not saying doctors are bad. I'm not saying don't do some of the stuff they say.
Right.
Make sure it's what you really want and what's right for you.
Right.
Because both of us are sitting here, because this is like 6 years later.
Survivors.
I had 3 spots. 2 of them, the next year I had another biopsy. 2 of them were gone. Third one was on basically keep an eye on it.
Right.
Way down. And that's where I'm at today. So,
wow.
So, but I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah. But I think we're not the norm. I don't think people really listen to their body or in tune or have.
Well, they think the doctor is God still.
Yeah.
I mean, they grew up with that, and it's like, they may be right on some stuff, but like I said, make sure.
Yeah. Oh, they both of my doctors, I'm going to tell you about the second one next, were humongous. Well, they provided like some humongous things in my life that I needed in terms of health and saving my life a couple times. So, I really admire and I respect them, but it's just what you said. They had this one track, thought that, and the second one. So, the first one, let me just go back. I didn't know anything about being a long-term survivor at that point. I had no idea. I really thought I was going to get sick at any moment. Second doctor, I'm feeling a little more like, I don't know. There's something going on here. I don't know what it is. Hopefully it means I'm going to survive. But he was instrumental in coming up with the cocktail approach to, medicinal solutions for HIV. And of course, he wrote a book about it, and that was his tact with me. Like, okay, we're going to put you on a cocktail. I'm like, right. No.
I'm a beer drinker. I'm not a cocktail drinker.
If it's a martini, maybe. So I was just very, adamant about not doing it. And once again, he was just kind of like a little shooken and not happy about it. But he said, like, okay, well, we'll just keep charting things and charting. And then when I did find out about being a non-progressor and I started doing a study, the person who was leading the study said I should start taking medication. And I was like, well, wouldn't that make me ineligible for your study? He's like, yeah, but I don't care. You need to do what's right. And you need to eat. Now it's just 1 pill a day and it's easy to take. There's no side effects. So I'm going to, we should write you out a prescription. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go back to my regular doctor and talk to him. And by that point, he was like, no, Kai, don't do that. So he had a total about face over the couple years that I had gone to him and said, no, don't take any medication. Yeah, at that point.
So the first doctor said don't take it when you went and talked to him.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Well, the second one technically.
Why did the guy want you to take the pill? Just to save your life? Or it would ruin his study?
Yeah.
What was his thought?
I think they still felt like you don't want to mess with your immune system, and once it gets compromised, if it slips too low, who knows what's going to happen. And I really think he had my best interest at heart when he said that, but he didn't know, we're all individuals. That's what's interesting about medicine. There's usually like one approach to curing people or helping people. And it's like, we're all different.
You're not a number.
Yeah. And our bodies are all different. And then when I did the NIH thing, that was when they did some more in-depth lab work on me. And they did say my viral load was going up and my T cells were going down. So that was when I had to make the choice to actually start taking medication.
And you were how many years into it though, since you...
35 years.
So you went 35 years.
My body fought for me.
For 35 years. Wow.
Yeah. It's hard to feel emotional about it. It's a mixed emotion. I survived. I didn't have to deal with so many of the side effects and complications and long-term life-changing things that HIV medications caused for so many people. It's just this interesting development where not only we found something that won't cure us, but it will keep us healthy. We have something that people can take to, not get AIDS or HIV. So it's
you're on the med. You've been on the meds what, 5 years now or something, or what?
about 5 to 7 years.
Okay.
I'm going to say.
All right.
Yeah, 5 years.
And that's one pill a day.
Yeah.
Not a cocktail.
No cocktails. Well, it's a cocktail and a pill.
Right.
I think there's like
Right.
3 or 4 different things.
But it's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. What a story.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have you back, and we're going to talk about your acting career.
Sure.
But I think we'll wrap up. We're kind of consistent on the topic here. Before my guest leaves, I always give them the chance to say, what in your life, what have you learned? What lesson can you pass on to my listeners?
Oh, wow.
What are some of the big things that you've learned?
I mean, it's a central theme to this story, but it's also with my acting. I just trust myself. Like, trust yourself. You've learned so much in your life, and you've absorbed so much of life, and but you're still you, and you still have who you are, your components inside of you that give you a gut feeling, or say, I think I can do that, but I'm just not sure. Well, if you think you can do it, you can do it. And if you commit to it and you trust yourself, you can do it. And I trusted myself in that I would survive, and I did. And in acting, you know the story, but your listeners don't.
Oh, we're going to tell more about that. That's our next episode.
We have to dangle the carrot, though. It's like,
it's a fun one.
Yeah.
All right, sir. You're a good guy.
Thank you.
And I thank you a lot for coming in today. It was great having you.
Great to be here.
Thanks.